A conqueror stands before an island city, a fortress surrounded not by walls of stone but by the sea itself. His enemy is not an army in the field, but the very geography of the world. For months, he has been told his ambition is madness, his goal impossible. He has defeated a great king on the battlefield and captured his mother, wife and children, but the war is far from over. The Persian fleet still rules the waves, a great serpent with coils stretching across the entire Mediterranean, a constant threat that can strike him from behind, cutting off his link to home. To kill this serpent, he must take its dens one by one. But this den, the island city of Tyre, is the most formidable of all. To conquer an island, he decides to do what no commander in history has ever conceived. He will build a bridge to it, a solid road across the waves. This is a new kind of war, a contest not merely of courage, but of engineering, relentless will, and brute force against the unyielding power of the elements. For 7 long months, this king will wage war on the sea itself, proving to his men, to his enemies, and to himself that for Alexander of Macedon, nothing is unconquerable. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Immortal History. In our last episode, we saw king clash with king at the pivotal Battle of Issus. We watched as Darius III, the King of Kings, fled for his life in a humiliating rout, abandoning his royal family to the mercy of the victor. Now, with the heartland of Persia still far beyond his grasp, Alexander turns his attention to the crucial Mediterranean coast. His strategy is simple and utterly brilliant. The Persian navy, a constant and dangerous threat to his supply lines and his control of Greece, is not primarily Persian at all. It is manned and harbored by the great maritime peoples of Phoenicia, Cyprus, and Egypt. If he cannot defeat their navy at sea, he will conquer its ports, leaving the fleet homeless, crewless, and with no choice but to turn its ships to his own cause. Today, we witness one of history's most incredible feats of military engineering, the grueling 7-month Siege of Tyre. We will then march south with Alexander's hardened army to the stubborn gates of Gaza, a fortress that will test his patience and reveal a darker, more ruthless side of his character. And finally, we will journey with him into the mystical heart of Egypt, across a perilous desert, to consult an oracle that will change Alexander and his destiny forever. This is the story of how Alexander the tactician became Alexander the engineer, the liberator, and in the eyes of many, a living god. The king is on the move, and he will not be stopped by towering walls, by scorched deserts, or even by the sea itself. After his stunning victory at Issus, most Phoenician cities, including Byblos and Sidon, quickly saw which way the political winds were blowing. They opened their gates, their fleets defecting to join Alexander's cause. But Tyre was different. It was a proud ancient metropolis, built on an island about a kilometer from the coast, its magnificent walls rising a breathtaking 150 feet directly from the sea. The Tyrians, confident in their island fortress, sent gifts and offered a pact of neutrality. But when Alexander, citing his ancestral link to their god Melkart, whom he identified with his own ancestor Heracles, requested to enter the city to offer a sacrifice, they refused. For a king bent on total dominion, who saw himself on a divine mission, this was an intolerable insult. To make matters worse, sealing their own doom, the Tyrians captured some of Alexander's men, executed them on the walls in full view of the Macedonian army, and contemptuously threw their bodies into the sea. Frustrated and now utterly enraged, Alexander announced a plan so audacious his own engineers thought it impossible. He would build a massive land bridge, a mole, across the sea to the island. In January of 332 BC, the monumental work began. His entire army became a construction crew. Thousands of soldiers and local laborers demolished the old city on the mainland for stone and rubble, while timber was brought from the famed forests of Lebanon to drive piles into the seabed. The Tyrians mocked them from the safety of their warships, but as the mole grew, stretching 100 then 200 feet wide out into the channel, derision turned to desperation. They launched amphibious raids, their sailors swimming to the causeway to disrupt the work, while ships fired arrows and projectiles at the unprotected workers. Alexander countered by building 2 massive 150-foot siege towers at the end of the mole. These were covered in rawhide to protect against fire arrows and armed with powerful catapults to provide covering fire for his men. The Tyrians, masters of the sea, responded with a stroke of diabolical genius. They took an old horse transport ship and loaded its hold with dry branches, pitch, sulfur, and other combustibles. From its masts, they hung cauldrons filled with flammable oil. On a day with a strong wind blowing toward the Macedonians, they towed the ship toward the mole, set it ablaze, and ran it aground directly into the siege towers. The ship exploded in a spectacular inferno, consuming the wooden towers and siege engines. As the fire raged, Tyrian sailors swarmed the causeway from small boats, destroying what remained of Alexander's hard-won progress. Any other commander might have given up, his project in ruins. Alexander, his fury stoked to a white heat, simply ordered his men to build a new mole, even wider and more resilient than the first. But he now understood a critical truth. He could never take Tyre without a fleet of his own. Leaving his lieutenants to oversee the reconstruction, he traveled to the cities that had already surrendered and gathered a massive navy of over 200 ships from Sidon, Cyprus, and other allies, placing this new armada under his direct command. Returning to Tyre, he used his new fleet to blockade its two harbors, trapping the once dominant Tyrian navy inside. The siege entered its final, brutal phase. With his new ships, Alexander deployed battering rams mounted on reinforced vessels, assaulting the walls from all sides, while his land forces pushed his new siege towers down the now completed mole. After 7 long, grinding months, a breach was finally made in the southern wall. Alexander himself, never one to lead from the rear, led the charge over the walls into the city. The fury of an army held at bay for so long was unleashed in a terrible storm of violence. 8,000 Tyrians were slaughtered in the vicious street-to-street fighting. As a terrifying message to any other city that would dare defy him again, Alexander ordered 2,000 men of military age to be crucified along the coast. The remaining 30,000 survivors, men, women, and children, were rounded up and sold into slavery. Leaving the ruins of Tyre smoking behind him, Alexander marched his army south towards Egypt. Only one more major stronghold stood in his way, the heavily fortified city of Gaza. Its commander, a loyal Persian eunuch named Batiss, had witnessed Tyre's fate, but refused to be intimidated. He believed his fortress, strategically situated on a high mound over 60 feet high and stocked for a long siege, could outlast the Macedonians. The walls of Gaza were too high, and its position too strong for the siege engines Alexander brought from Tyre. So, echoing his monumental work at the island city, he ordered his men to begin another massive engineering project. A huge earthen rampart around the entire fortress to bring his siege towers level with the walls. The work was grueling and dangerous. During a fierce sortie by the defenders, who burst from the city to attack the Macedonians, Alexander, leading from the front as always, was struck by a catapult bolt. The projectile pierced his shield and his armor, lodging itself deep in his shoulder and grievously wounding him. Infuriated by the stubborn resistance, the loss of his men and his own painful injury, Alexander's mood darkened considerably. Once the walls were finally breached after a 2-month siege, his mercy, so famously shown to Darius's family, was gone. The entire male population was killed and the women and children were sold into slavery. According to the Roman historian Quintus Curtius Rufus, Alexander reserved a special horrific fate for the brave commander, Batiss. Alexander admired courage, but he was enraged by Batiss's defiant silence upon his capture. Allegedly, in a conscious and grim echo of his ancestor Achilles' treatment of Hector's body, Alexander had holes bored through the living commander's ankles, tied him to a chariot, and dragged him around the city walls until he was dead. With the entire eastern Mediterranean coast finally secured, Alexander marched into Egypt in late 332 BC. He was not met with spears and arrows, but with jubilant cheers. The Egyptians, who had suffered under often oppressive Persian rule, welcomed him as a liberator. Showing profound political wisdom, he honored their gods, made sacrifices at their temples in Memphis, and most significantly, laid the groundwork for a new city on the Mediterranean coast, Alexandria, a city destined to become a global beacon of knowledge, culture, and trade. But Alexander had a more personal, more profound quest in mind. In early 331 BC, he undertook a perilous 300-mile journey deep into the western desert to visit the famed Oracle of Amun at the Siwa oasis. After a grueling trek across scorching sands, marked by disorienting sandstorms, his army was miraculously saved when they ran out of water by a sudden rainstorm, and when lost, were reportedly guided by a pair of ravens. These omens only deepened his sense of purpose. What happened inside the temple's inner sanctum is known only to Alexander, but according to ancient writers, as he entered, the high priest greeted him not as a king, but as the son of Amun, the Egyptian king of the gods, whom the Greeks equated with their own Zeus. Some historians suggest this was a simple linguistic misunderstanding, with the priest meaning to say, "O Paidion," "O my son," but a slight mispronunciation made it "O Pai Dios," "O son of Zeus." The oracle reportedly confirmed that he was divine, that he was destined to rule the world, and that all of his father Philip's murderers had been brought to justice. Alexander left Siwa a profoundly changed man. Whether he truly believed he was a god, or simply understood the immense political power of such a claim to legitimize his rule in Egypt and beyond, is debated to this day. But from that moment on, he began to embrace his own divinity. He was no longer just the son of Philip. In his mind and in his propaganda, he was the son of Zeus Ammon. Meanwhile, Darius III, having retreated to Babylon after his humiliating defeat at Issus, had been frantically busy. He was not idle. He was raising a second, even larger grand army, drawing troops from every corner of his vast empire. He sent Alexander another offer of peace, this time far more generous and desperate. He offered all of his territory west of the Euphrates River, a staggering ransom of 10,000 talents for his captive family, and the hand of his daughter, Statera, in marriage. This would effectively make Alexander his heir and co-ruler of a divided empire. Alexander presented the astonishing offer to his council of generals. His most trusted commander, the veteran and ever-cautious Parmenion, was stunned by the terms. He argued that it was everything they had fought for and more. "If I were Alexander," Parmenion declared, "I would accept it." Alexander's famous reply revealed the now boundless, almost cosmic nature of his ambition. "So would I," he retorted sharply, "if I were Parmenion." For him, the time for negotiation was long past. His goals had expanded beyond revenge or security. He sought total, absolute conquest. There was no room in the world for two great kings. He sent his reply to Darius, a message that left no doubt. There could not be two suns in the sky, he stated. He was not interested in being a son-in-law or a co-ruler of a lesser half. He demanded unconditional surrender, telling Darius to prepare himself and stand and fight for his kingdom, because he would be pursued to the ends of the earth. The time for diplomacy was over. The stage for the final act was set. In the summer of 331 BC, Alexander marched his army of roughly 47,000 hardened veterans out of Egypt, crossed the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, and pushed deep into the heart of Mesopotamia. Darius, his generous peace offer scornfully rejected, had chosen the ground for the final confrontation himself. Near a small village called Gaugamela, on a wide, flat plain, he gathered a colossal army drawn from every corner of his empire: Bactrian and Scythian cavalry, Indian war elephants, elite Greek mercenaries, and the best infantry he could muster, with some ancient sources claiming numbers as high as 250,000 men. He had even ordered the ground to be leveled and cleared of obstacles to give his fearsome scythed chariots a clear, unobstructed run at the Macedonian phalanx. On the night before the battle, the Macedonians could see the horizon ablaze with the endless line of Persian campfires, a terrifying twinkling reminder of the overwhelming numbers they faced. Parmenion, unnerved by the enemy's sheer scale, approached Alexander and strongly suggested a surprise night attack to sow confusion and mitigate their numerical advantage. Alexander flatly refused. He would not steal a victory. He would defeat this grand army in the broad light of day, for all the world to see, securing a glorious and undeniable triumph that would leave no question as to who was the true master of Asia. This would be the final reckoning. At stake was not a province or a coastline, but the fate of the entire Persian Empire and the mastery of the known world. One king had declared himself a god. The other commanded one of the largest armies the world had ever seen. As the sun rose on October 1st, 331 BC, only one would be left standing. If you are captivated by this unstoppable ambition, reinforce our battle lines by hitting the like button. Every like helps our channel conquer the algorithm and bring this epic story to more history enthusiasts. To witness the final cataclysmic showdown at Gaugamela, subscribe and sound the notification bell. Don't miss the battle that will decide the fate of an empire.